The clock struck midnight as Sarah sat alone in her dimly lit living room, her laptop screen casting an eerie glow across her face. She had heard rumors about a terrifying horror story circulating online, a tale so bone-chilling that it was said to be cursed. But Sarah was never one to back down from a challenge, especially when it came to proving her bravery. With trembling fingers, she clicked on the link that had been sent to her by a friend. The webpage loaded slowly, the anticipation building with each passing second. And then, without warning, the screen flickered to life, and Sarah found herself plunged into a world of darkness and dread. The opening scene was enough to send shivers down her spine. A lone figure stood in the midst of a desolate forest, the moonlight casting long shadows across the ground. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and Sarah felt a knot forming in the pit of her stomach. As the story unfolded, Sarah found herself drawn deeper and deeper into its twisted narrative. Each twist in turn sent her pulse racing, her heart pounding in her chest. But despite the growing sense of unease, she couldn't tear her eyes away from the screen. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room, causing Sarah to jump in her seat. She glanced around frantically, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. But there was nothing there, nothing except the darkness pressing in on all sides. With trembling hands, Sarah reached for the volume button on her laptop, trying to drown out the sound of her racing heart. But no matter how high she turned it up, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that something was lurking just beyond the edge of her vision. As the story reached its climax, Sarah's nerves were stretched to their breaking point. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the windows sent her pulse skyrocketing. And then, just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, the screen went black. For a moment, there was silence, a deafening void that seemed to swallow her whole. And then, without warning, a pair of glowing eyes appeared on the screen, their gaze piercing through the darkness. Sarah screamed, her voice echoing through the empty house as the horror of what she had just witnessed sank in. But as she sat there, trembling and alone in the darkness, she couldn't shake the feeling that the story was far from over, that the true terror was only just beginning. And as the clock struck midnight once again, Sarah knew that she would never be able to watch another horror story alone. In the small town of Hollow Creek, nestled deep within the dense forests of the Appalachian Mountains, there stood an old, dilapidated mansion known as Blackwood Manor. Legend had it that the mansion was haunted by the spirits of its former occupants, who had met tragic ends within its walls. Despite the warnings from the locals, a group of thrill-seekers decided to spend a night inside the mansion to prove the existence of the supernatural. Among them was Maya, a skeptic who prided herself on her rationality. She was accompanied by her friends, Alex, the brave and adventurous leader of the group, Sarah, the timid and superstitious one, and Jake, the skeptic's boyfriend who was reluctantly dragged along for the ride. As they approached Blackwood Manor, a sense of foreboding washed over them. The mansion loomed before them, its once grand facade now crumbling and covered in ivy. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the sound of the wind whistling through the trees seemed to echo with the whispers of the past. Despite their reservations, the group entered the mansion, their footsteps echoing loudly in the empty halls. As they explored the dusty rooms, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if the very walls themselves were alive with malevolent intent. As night fell, they gathered in the grand foyer, their nerves on edge and their senses heightened. Alex lit a few candles, casting eerie shadows on the walls, while Sarah clutched a rosary tightly in her trembling hands. Maya rolled her eyes at their superstitions, dismissing them as nothing more than irrational fear. But as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. Shadows danced in the corners of their vision, and whispers echoed through the halls. Objects moved on their own, and the temperature seemed to drop with each passing moment. Sarah's fear reached a breaking point when she claimed to see a figure standing at the top of the staircase, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Alex tried to reassure her, but even he couldn't deny the sense of unease that hung heavy in the air. As the hours dragged on, Maya's skepticism began to waver. She couldn't explain the strange phenomena they were witnessing, and a cold dread settled in the pit of her stomach. And then, just when they thought things couldn't get any worse, they heard it, the sound of a child's laughter echoing through the halls. They followed the sound to the basement, where they found a hidden door concealed behind a tapestry. With trembling hands, they pushed it open, revealing a staircase leading down into darkness. Against their better judgment, they descended into the depths of the mansion, their flashlights cutting through the inky blackness. But as they reached the bottom, they were greeted by a sight that chilled them to the bone. In the center of the room stood a child, his eyes vacant and soulless as he stared at them with a chilling smile. Behind him, a portal to the spirit realm crackled with otherworldly energy, its tendrils reaching out to ensnare them. With a scream, they turned and ran, the echoes of their footsteps reverberating through the darkness as they fled for their lives. But no matter how fast they ran, they couldn't escape the horrors of Blackwood Manor. And as the first light of dawn broke through the windows, they knew that they would never be the same again. In the remote countryside of Scotland, there lay a picturesque village called Dunmuir, shrouded in mist for much of the year. Nestled within the mist-covered hills stood an ancient stone mansion known as Ravenwood Manor. Its dark history and eerie atmosphere had long made it the subject of local folklore, whispered about in hushed tones by the villagers. One foggy evening, a group of friends, Eleanor, Marcus, Lily, and Ben, decided to explore Ravenwood Manor, drawn by the allure of its mystery. Armed with only flashlights and their sense of adventure, they ventured into the mist-shrouded grounds, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. As they approached the looming mansion, the fog seemed to grow thicker, obscuring their vision and heightening their sense of unease. But they pressed on, fueled by a combination of curiosity and youthful bravado. Entering the mansion, they were greeted by a musty smell that hung heavy in the air, mingling with the dampness of the fog. The walls were adorned with faded tapestries and portraits of long-dead ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow the intruders with silent accusation. Despite the chill that permeated the air, Eleanor led the group deeper into the mansion, her curiosity overriding her fear. But as they explored further, strange occurrences began to unfold. Doors slammed shut behind them, and disembodied whispers echoed through the halls, sending shivers down their spines. As the night wore on, the group found themselves separated, each member wandering alone through the labyrinthine corridors of Ravenwood Manor. Panic began to set in as they realized they were not alone, something sinister lurked in the shadows, watching their every move. Lily, the most sensitive of the group, claimed to hear the anguished cries of a woman echoing through the mansion. Marcus scoffed at her superstitions, but even he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. In a desperate attempt to reunite, they followed a trail of flickering candlelight to the mansion's grand ballroom. But instead of finding each other, they stumbled upon a haunting scene, a ghostly figure gliding across the dance floor, its movements graceful yet chilling. Frozen in terror, they watched as the figure beckoned them forward with a spectral hand, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Unable to resist its call, they followed, their footsteps echoing in the silence of the ballroom. But just as they reached out to touch the figure, it vanished into thin air, leaving them alone in the darkness. And as the first light of dawn began to break through the fog, they realized that Ravenwood Manor held secrets far darker than they could have ever imagined.